Iswahi. I'm Director of the Studies program at SIVA. And welcome all of you. I want to thank Mohsen and Fawzia Jafar Foundation for sponsoring this talk, and also my colleagues who advertise the program. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Mehdi Hasan. Many of you already know him. It's very impactful interviews and presence at Al Jazeera, especially in 2013. We had a famous encounter at Oxford in Cairo. Mehdi Hasan is the award-winning presenter of the Upfront head-to-head. I think head-to-head is every week.
Upfront every week.
Upfront every week. And which I recommend strongly for all of you to watch in Al Jazeera English. Born and brought up in the UK, but now based in Washington, D.C. He is the former political director of the Huffington Post UK, a regular contributor to the New York Times, The Guardian, and the author of 2 books. Mr. Hasan has been included in the annual list of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world. And he was also included in 100 most influential in the UK. As I said, initially his Oxford Union speech on Islam and peace became extremely influential in 2013. The last time I wrote was more than 2 million people watched the debate. And he has interviewed many leaders and intellectuals and politicians. I recommend that every week if you have time to look at this program. So I have asked him to talk about an interesting subject, especially for the Americans who are going to the elections in less than 2 weeks. And of course the issue of Islam has been pretty much in the media. One of the candidates, of course, is running his partially platform anti-Muslim campaign. So I think it's an appropriate time for Mehdi Hasan to talk about that, and perhaps even contextualize his discussions with the PSC Q&A. So join me and welcome him to FIU.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Ooh, that is nice. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, how are you all doing? Pleasure and privilege to be here. In Miami, Florida, it's my first time to a great city. Not the greatest of weather, but my first time. Everything I know about Miami I learned in the 1980s from watching Crockett and Tubbs on Miami Vice. I then supplemented that knowledge with Bad Boys 1 and 2, so I have real in-depth knowledge of your city, I'm sure it's all accurate. Ladies and gentlemen, the election. Let's assume this forthcoming presidential election isn't rigged against the poor, defenseless Republican Party. So picture the scene. It's 2018. President Donald J. Trump is 2 years into his first term as Commander-in-Chief. The White House is now gold. Melania is First Lady. Sarah Palin is Secretary of Education. Mike Tyson is Attorney General. And they're having a big party to celebrate 2 years of Trumpland. And the guests arrive at the White House and they see Donald Trump, President Trump, sitting in the corner, whispering to Vice President Pence. And one of the guests goes over, he says, "What are you guys talking about?" And Trump says, "We're planning World War III. He says, "World War III? That sounds fascinating. What does that involve?" He said, "Well, we're going to begin here at home. We're going to round up all 3.3 million American Muslims and one dentist." This guy says, "One dentist? Why would you lock up one dentist?" And Trump turns to Pence, he said, "I told you nobody would ask about the Muslims." So, that, you actually think this is real. That is the kind of rhetoric that we're into now. We laugh about Trump and his mad claims and plans. He wants a Muslim database. He wants to ban Muslims from America. He has surrogates like Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, who said on Fox News a few weeks ago that we should test We should test every person here who is of Muslim background, and if they believe in Sharia, he said, they should be deported. For the first time, Muslim parents, by the way, are telling their kids, son, there's a test we need you to fail. But this is the language, this is the climate we're in now. Deported. This is the political climate which we meet today. Islam bashing, Muslim baiting, race baiting, fear mongering, hysteria and paranoia on a near daily basis. And people around the world are witnessing, Muslims around the world are witnessing this phenomenon, unprecedented. And people say, why are Muslims so anti-American in places like the Middle East, Africa, Asia? And there are many reasons for quote-unquote anti-Americanism. What do you think happens when people around the world see, for example, the President of the United States for 8 straight years smeared as a secret Muslim? What impact do you think that has on people around the world? This is a country, one of the richest, best educated, most technologically advanced nations on earth, where 1 in 5 members of the population, even today, including prominent platform speakers at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, believe that their proudly Christian president is a secret Muslim. It almost beggars belief. Now, Muslims around the world, in particular, are watching this election, not just because they're nervous about the outcome, because they're wondering whether they'll ever be able to fly to the US again, take their kids to Disneyland, but also because the United States of America, for many people, especially Muslims living under dictatorships, was supposed to be the benchmark, the beacon, the exemplar of liberal democracy. All of the polls and surveys show that Muslims around the world may hate US foreign policies. They don't hate US democracy or US freedom. And they're seeing what's happening to it. Now, I want to speak today about the US picture, not the global picture. I want to talk about Islam in America and Islamophobia in America. And Muslim Americans, I now live here, work here. I moved from the UK last year. My wife, my 2 daughters are Muslim Americans. Their future, in part, is being decided on November the 8th. I want to speak about politics, and I want to speak about the media, because those are the 2 driving forces, the main forces behind a lot of this manufactured hysteria and anti-Muslim bigotry. On the subject of the media, I'm always reminded of a story about a reporter in a local newspaper who's walking through Central Park in New York one day. It's a sunny afternoon, and he sees a small child being attacked by a savage dog. Dog's going crazy attacking his child. He wonders what to do. Before he can even decide, a guy jumps out from behind a bush, jumps on the dog, pulls the dog off the child, holds his jaws apart, kills the dog, saves the child. The reporter captures it all on his camera phone. He walks over, he said, "My friend, you're in luck. I'm a reporter with the local paper. We're going to put your picture on the front of tomorrow's paper under the headline, 'Brave New Yorker saves innocent child from mad dog.'" The guy says, "Well, I'm not from New York." He says, "That's fine. The headline will read, 'American hero saves small boy from savage dog.'" He says, "I'm not American either." He says, "Well, what are you?" He says, "I'm a graduate student visiting from Pakistan." The next day, the headline reads, "Innocent American dog murdered by ISIS terrorists." Obviously not a true headline, but the point is, it's not that far off from some of the headlines that we have seen, both in my country, Britain, and in the US, some of the crazy, distorted headlines that we see about British Muslims, French Muslims, American Muslims. In many ways, anti-Muslim, anti-Islam hysteria is worse in the United States, and I've witnessed it get worse over the past decade visiting this country. I'm not just referring to Fox News, which has become almost a pantomime villain with its various hosts and pundits who have compared Islam to the Antichrist, compared Muslims to Nazis, compared the Quran to Mein Kampf, claimed that every terrorist is a Muslim, and called for young Muslim men at airports to be strip searched, among other things you may have heard on Fox News in recent years. I'm not just referring to Fox News, but also to quote-unquote the mainstream media, the liberal media. You have, for example, a recent New York Times column by the impeccably liberal Roger Cohen, headlined, "Islam and the West at War." You have the Atlantic Monthly essay by Graham Wood last year, which started by pointing out that ISIS is apparently, quote, "very Islamic." Or CNN host Don Lemon, good old Don Lemon, who randomly live on air last year asked a Muslim human rights lawyer on his show, "Do you support ISIS?" A study of US TV and cable news between 2008 and 2012 by the University of Illinois professor Travis Dixon found, surprise, surprise, a disproportionate and blatant overrepresentation of Muslims as terrorists. In 2014, a study by Christine Ogan from the University of North Carolina pointed out, quote, empirical evidence for such a possible interaction between media coverage and latent anti-Muslim feelings is mounting. One study, she says, that analysed Fox News viewers' anti-Muslim feelings reported, for example, that 60% of Republicans who most trusted Fox News also believed that Muslims were attempting to establish Sharia law in the United States. And those trusting Fox News the most also tended to believe that Islamic values are incompatible with American values. This is scary stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Scary stuff. Because to pretend that relentlessly negative, relentlessly hostile, and fear-mongering coverage of a marginalized, largely non-white minority has no effect on community relations or on integration is naive, if not disingenuous. Portraying Muslims as different and dangerous on a daily basis has serious repercussions. From bomb attacks and arson attacks on mosques, to Muslim women in hijab being assaulted or spat at in the street, to Muslim children being bullied in school at record levels. It leads to Muslims in the West, educated, mainstream, integrated Muslims, feeling further alienated from the mainstream, further disillusioned with the mainstream. And so growing Islamophobia in the United States, whether on TV or on Capitol Hill, isn't just morally wrong, it's dangerous, it's counterproductive. It doesn't just increase feelings of alienation, it makes the extremist, the quote-unquote jihadist narrative so much more appealing to some angry or bitter or confused young Muslims living in the West. Politicians, security agencies, terrorism experts, they always, you must have heard this phrase, we need to win hearts and minds. Nothing does more to lose hearts and minds, Muslim hearts and minds, than the incessant, relentless, negative headlines, disparaging generalizations, lazy stereotypes, made-up fictitious stories that we see about Islam and Muslims, not just in the press, but in presidential campaigns. Can it be overcome? Can it be beaten? How do we turn the tide of anti-Muslim bigotry? When it comes to combating ignorance, bigotry, this flood of anti-Muslim hatred, the sad truth is you guys are here at a university, you're learning, you're being taught, and yet all of the studies show that just increasing knowledge doesn't help. Facts and figures are poor when it comes to combating bigotry. What's absolutely necessary is the building of relationships, alliances, friendships. It's what's called in the social science literature the contact theory. The idea here is that through personal contact with the other, in this case, the Muslim, anti-Muslim feelings fall away. They can be discarded over time. It is for this reason that Robert Putnam, the leading Harvard academic, argues that teaching people about religion or religious prejudice is less important when it comes to fighting and reducing bigotry and prejudice than is fostering and nurturing strong relationships. And the evidence in relation to Islamophobia is overwhelming. According to polling carried out in the US by the University of Maryland, Professor Shibli Talhami, quote, majorities of those who know some Muslims, even if not well, have favorable views of Muslims. And this, he says, holds across the political spectrum, from left to right. For example, he says only 22% of Republicans who know no Muslims, have favorable views of them, compared with 51% of Republicans who know some Muslims, but not well, and 59% of Republicans who know some Muslims well. A report by the pollsters at Pew came to a similar conclusion. Quote, knowing someone from a religious group is linked with having relatively more positive views of that group. Muslims get a neutral rating from those who know a Muslim and a cooler rating from those who do not know a Muslim. It's a no-brainer when you think about it. The more non-Muslims get to know real, in-the-flesh Muslims, not the bogeymen they see on their cable news channels, the more they'll be able to get past their prejudices, ignorance, fantasies about Muslims. But here's the problem. There aren't enough of us, Muslims, there aren't enough of Muslims to do that job, to do the heavy lifting and building all the relationships on their own. Muslims make up between 1% and 2% of the US population, and thus polls show only 38% of Americans say they personally know someone who is Muslim, which again makes the media's role so crucial here. That's why I've spent so many years talking about focus on how Muslims are portrayed and depicted in the media. And not just in terms of news stories. We get caught up in the news, but actually most people don't get their views from the news. It's about trying to normalize the coverage of Muslims in everyday life, in popular culture, outside of discussions about terrorism, national security, foreign policy. As President Obama noted in his speech at the Islamic Society in Baltimore earlier this year, our television shows should have some Muslim characters that are unrelated to national security, because it's not hard to do, he said. There was a time when there were no black people on television, President Obama said, and you can tell good stories while still representing the reality of our communities. The news anchor Katie Couric said a few years ago, during the hysteria and controversy over the Ground Zero mosque, which remember, wasn't a mosque, it wasn't a Ground Zero, that maybe it's time for a Muslim Cosby show, she said, to try and win over public opinion. Because remember, until the Cosby show came along in the 1980s, some of you probably too young to remember. God, I feel old. Most white American families didn't know any, hadn't interacted with any actual quote-unquote mainstream, normal black American families living the American dream, dealing with the same everyday family problems, work problems, relationship issues that they did. The Cosby show did dramatically change attitudes, impacted the debate on race in this country. So yes, maybe we need a Muslim Cosby show. Although given what Bill Cosby's been through recently, maybe not the best of analogies, just saying. But you take my point. Before you can hope for any political change at the top, you have to work at a relationship level, you have to work at a community level, you have to work at a media level, you have to work at a popular culture level. According to a 2012 Hollywood Reporter poll, 27% of Americans, more than 1 in 4, who changed their mind about gay marriage in this country, from anti to pro in the last decade, said that they made their decision based on watching gay characters on television, like Will and Grace, and of course, good old Cameron and Mitchell on Modern Family. Perceptions matter, relationships matter, normalization matters. Muslims in America need to be seen to be doing normal things because they are normal people, they're not aliens. And always remember this too, the struggle against Islamophobia is not merely about a single pressure group or a single minority group pushing this or that piece of legislation or trying to change this or that aspect of media coverage. It's about making a moral case, a rights-based case, an equality case. All of us, Muslims, non-Muslims alike, making a moral case for the equal dignity of all people, regardless of faith, race, gender, or sexuality. Fighting for equal dignity and mutual respect. Refusing, in the late Edward Said's words, to denigrate, demonize, or dehumanize. We saw the results of that awful dehumanization in this very state only a few months ago, when 29-year-old Omar Mateen murdered 49 people in cold blood and wounded 53 others in a shooting at the Pulse nightclub. Horrific, tragic, shameful. And what happened? Immediately exploited by certain politicians for personal gain, no matter the cost to communities, no matter the cost to relationships. This has been an election cycle, ladies and gentlemen, in which Muslims have been placed under unprecedented scrutiny, and which they've been subjected to an astonishing amount of smears, false accusations, and vicious threats. And just to be clear, I'm not being partisan here, or party political, I promise. Yes, we have a Republican candidate who wants to ban foreign Muslims, put American Muslims on a database, who likes the idea publicly, he's said this several times, likes the idea of using bullets covered in pig blood to kill Muslim terrorists. FYI, Donald, pig blood is not kryptonite for Muslims. Just saying. So you have Donald Trump with his crazy rhetoric, his hate speech. You have Ben Carson on the Republican side, who says that you can't be a practicing Muslim and a loyal American. You're a schizophrenic if you try and do both. You have Rudy Giuliani bragging about putting Muslim police or putting police officers inside mosques. You have all of that on the one hand. And on the other, the Democratic Party, which is undeniably less bigoted, less hate-filled at the moment, yet still doesn't have a clean record on these issues. You have a Senate Minority Leader, Harry Reid of the Democrats, who's accused of telling a Muslim congressional candidate in Nevada that he should stand down from the race because he's Muslim, he can't get elected. You have a former Democratic President, Bill Clinton, in his speech at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, saying, if you're a Muslim and you love America and freedom and you hate terror, stay here and help us win. and make a future together. We want you. Muslims, in his eyes, being a separate foreign entity, separate from us and we, and only be allowed to stay here if they love America and if they hate terror. Thank you, Bill. You also have a sitting Democratic president of the United States who, for all his admirable rhetoric on some of these issues, let's not forget, refused to step foot inside a US mosque until the 8th year of his 8 years in office. Now, a lot of Muslims respond to a lot of this negativity by saying there's no point in voting. A big election coming up. There's no point in voting. Voting doesn't change anything. Elections don't matter. Muslim Americans can't make a difference. There's no real choice between Donald Trump, who hates Muslims, and Hillary Clinton, who bombs Muslims. There's no choice there. Which is nonsense, of course. There's always a choice. There's always a lesser of two evils. Earlier this year, Senator Lindsey Graham said that having to choose between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump was like having to choose between being shot and being poisoned. And I know many Muslim Americans feel the same way about now having to choose between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And yes, the choices aren't always great. They aren't always ideal. But to quote Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst form of government apart from all the others. And look, it's simply not true to say that elections don't matter, or that Muslims can't influence them. As some of you may know, the most consequential election of our lifetime, the presidential election of 2000, which gave the world George W. Bush, which put Bush in the White House, and gave the world the invasion of Afghanistan, the occupation of Iraq, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, the Patriot Act, etc., etc. That election saw an astonishing 80% of Muslim Americans voting for Bush over Gore. In fact, in this key state of Florida, where a wafer-thin 537 votes split Bush from Gore, 60,000 Floridian Muslims voted for Bush, prompting the influential conservative activist Grover Norquist to pronounce that George W. Bush was elected President of the United States because of the Muslim vote. Because of the Muslim vote. And that worked out so well for the Muslims of America, didn't it? Well done, Florida Muslims. And look, even this year, it's true that Muslims still constitute only 1 to 2% of US voters. But as the leading pollster John Zogby recently noted, those Muslim voters, yes, a small number, are actually strategically located, he says, in swing states such as Virginia, Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan. In fact, those 5 swing states have 1 million Muslims living in them between those 5 states, which could be the turning point both in this and other elections. So let's be clear, Muslim votes can undoubtedly make a difference. Maybe not a big difference, but a difference nevertheless. And crucially, they should make a difference. Muslim American voters should be showing the Islamophobes, in particular, that their brazen and shameful anti-Muslim bigotry isn't cost-free. It comes at a price. It comes with electoral consequences. There really can be as many political downsides as there are upsides. Ladies and gentlemen, as an outsider, as a British Muslim resident of this great nation of yours, but as the husband and father of 3 Muslim Americans, I always look on in awe at the number of opportunities that Muslim Americans have compared to, say, even European Muslims, to politically engage, to make an impact here in this country. You guys get to vote for everyone. From the governor of your state to the local sheriff, from the president of the United States to the members of your school board. You just love electing everyone. So I want to say to Muslim Americans, use your vote. Try to make it count, both at a local level and a national level. There are between 3 and 6 million Muslims living in this country, and yet there are only 2 Muslim members of Congress, when those numbers, if they were proportionate, would be reflected by between 6 and 12 Muslim congressmen and women. In the Senate, there should be, based on the numbers, at least 1 or 2 Muslim senators. There are 0, there never have been any. And that's a scandal. Now, a lot of that has to do with institutional racism and built-in white privilege. This is a country which in its entire history has only ever elected 9 black people to the Senate. So Muslims aren't alone there, lacking in representation. But here's the thing, Muslim Americans lag behind other faith groups in terms of voter registration, for example. Only 60% of Muslim Americans were registered to vote prior to this election campaign beginning, compared to 86% of Jewish Americans and 94% of Christian Americans. Now, thanks to the Trump effect, the fear of a Trump presidency, that stat is slowly changing. As of June, according to the Council of American Islamic Relations, there were 824,000 likely registered Muslim voters, up 300,000 since the 2012 presidential election. The aim of the Coalition of Muslim Civil Society Groups is to have 1 million Muslims registered to vote by the end of this electoral cycle. And good luck to them. Whatever the undoubted challenges they face, Muslim Americans need to be working harder to elect candidates who can represent their values, their interests, their needs, and standing up for their rights. I often say to Muslims living in the West, to engage is not to endorse, is not to approve or agree. To engage is to show you have a stake in society. It doesn't mean that you're completely on board with everything candidate X or candidate Y says on this or that issue. But it does mean that if you want to be part of the conversation, part of the debate, you have to engage. As the old saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And look, let's be clear. If they're looking for inspiration, for guidance, Muslim Americans don't lack for role models in all walks of public life. We hear so much negativity about this or that extremist, this or that hate preacher, this or that homegrown terrorist. And yet Muslim Americans can look at Muslim Congressman Keith Ellison of Minnesota, who chairs the House Progressive Caucus, and his fellow Muslim Congressman Andre Carson, Omar Abedin, probably Hillary Clinton's closest advisor and aide, who will become one of the most powerful people in the world in a few months' time. Imtiaz Muhammad, the fencing champion, who brought back a bronze medal from the Olympics this summer. Khizr Khan, father of the late Captain Humayun Khan, whose 6-minute speech to the Democratic Convention shook the Trump campaign to its core and sent sales of the US Constitution skyrocketing on Amazon overnight. Oh, and don't forget the former head of the CIA's counterterrorism center, who ran it for nearly a decade after 9/11, and who was, believe it or not, a convert to Islam. Yes, a Muslim American man named Michael DeAndrea wrote former CIA Director Michael Moran in the New York Times recently, a Muslim American was, quote, most responsible for keeping America safe after the September 11th attacks. That's the verdict of the former head of the CIA. So these are Muslims, ladies and gentlemen. There are Muslim Americans who have understood that the way they can make a difference in the world is to engage in the world around them, to roll up their sleeves and get involved, to try and improve the lives of everyone in their society despite the bigotry targeted at their community. There are role models, there are positive examples, there are success stories, but there are so many defeatist and cynical Muslims say to me, look, some small change might be possible, but big change, that's never going to happen. No amount of engagement on our part or lobbying on our part will make non-Muslim America take us seriously. It's impossible to change a society like America's. It's impossible to bring about positive change in a dysfunctional political system like America's, they say. Impossible. To which the only response is to quote the late great Muslim American, probably the greatest Muslim American of all time, the late great Muhammad Ali, who said, impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. Impossible is not a declaration, it's a dare. Impossible is potential, impossible is temporary, impossible is nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, I say to all of you, but particularly to those members of minorities, ethnic minorities, religious minorities, now is the time. Now is the time for all of us to stand up and be counted. Now is the time to speak out loud and proud. There has never been a better time or a more important time. Now is the time to make that difference we always thought we could, to be that difference we've always wanted to be. What was it Gandhi said? Be the change that you wish to see in the world. Remember, this moment in political history, when and where we are, the time and the place, 2016, the United States of America, Islamophobia run wild, bigots unleashed, Muslims demonized and dehumanized. That is the climate we're in. And I say in talks like this, it's not enough just to analyze and study and understand. What are we going to do about it? There was that famous British Army recruitment poster during World War I, with 2 kids sitting on their father's lap, and the caption says, Daddy, what did you do during the Great War? In decades to come, your kids, your grandkids might ask you, Mom, Dad, what did you do during the great Islamophobia frenzy of 2016, when candidates for the highest offices in the land decided to use Muslim Americans as a political piñata? What did you do? Did you sit on the sidelines, Complaining and carping on Facebook, moaning and groaning on Twitter? Or did you get organized? Did you get engaged? Did you put your money where your mouth is? What will you tell your kids? Ladies and gentlemen, this is no ordinary year and this is no ordinary election. For most Muslim Americans, engagement is not an option, it's a necessity. It's not a choice, it's self-defense. We need to say to those who demonize us, at the drop of a hat, that there will be a political cost. There will be an electoral cost. We need to draw a line in the sand and say, this far, no further. We will not allow you to use us as pawns in your political game, as punch bags, as scapegoats, as fall guys. This is the time for Muslim Americans, alongside their non-Muslim friends and allies, the great majority of decent, tolerant Americans, to stand up for the quintessentially American and Islamic values of equality, justice, liberty, tolerance, self-respect, dignity. This is the time to engage, to organize, to lobby, to vote, because if not now, when? If not us, who? Thank you very much for your time.
He'll take some questions. We have a microphone.
Comments, criticisms, attacks.
I have a loud voice, so I could just. All right. First of all, I don't know if it's working. Yeah. Thank you for this talk. It was very insightful. I'm a Muslim American, born and raised in this country. My voice is really loud. I'm just going to go ahead.
They can't hear you.
Oh, they can't? Okay, sorry. So I grew up with parents who migrated to the U.S. for a better future, for the American dream, and growing up in family gatherings, we were constantly told that we need to engage, we need to be effective, and most of all, we need to always have a smile on our face, ready to answer questions and be very friendly, because we were this face of Islam in America. When I was in college, I was very active, so I didn't mind doing that. We were part of the MSO groups. But now, as a mother of two little girls and slowly entering my 30s, not there yet, I'm kind of sick of it. You know what I mean? Like, the word you kept saying is engage. I just want to know to what level, right? How much responsibility are we going to put on young girls? Because remember, a lot of the Muslim women who wear hijab, you stand out a little bit more. So how much responsibility are we going to put on them? As a young mother, when I'm walking into Publix with my toddler who's having a tantrum, a baby who's crying, I don't want to answer questions on, do you go to sleep in the hijab? Or do you speak Islamic? These questions, I just don't want to answer them, when I'm not in the mood, right? So we do want to engage, but how far? And how much responsibility are we going to be putting on these young men and women, but specifically I want to talk about women, Muslim women.
It's a very good question, and it's a real dilemma. Just on your subject about questions you have to face, I'm always reminded of the poll of Republican voters last year, which found, I think, 25% of Republican voters said they would be willing to bomb Agrabah, which is a fictional kingdom from Aladdin. But that's what you're facing. There's a problem here. Look, on the one hand, and I'll relate this back to the general terrorism stuff, which is there's a big debate amongst Muslims, which is when a terrorist attack happens, why should we have to condemn it? Right? There's a big debate, you know that. A lot of discussion. My wife and I have all the time. When a guy shoots up an abortion clinic, all Christians aren't accepted to condemn it. When an Israeli settler burns down a Palestinian town or village, no Jews are expected to condemn it. Why is there all this special pressure on Muslims? And my answer to that is, it's wrong, it's unfair, it's unequal, it's discriminatory. What are you going to do about it? That's the problem. So, as much as I accept the argument that it's unfair that we're held to double standards, it's unfair that there is a special responsibility placed on us, it's unfair that you just want to be able to quote the great Ben Affleck, Muslims just want to eat their sandwiches and go to work and pray their prayers and not answer for every crime in the world. As much as I accept all that, and I would love to live in that world, we have to live in the world we live in. And the world we live in, there are clear and present dangers around us. There is a man who's heading for the Oval Office who wants to set up a database for you and your child. So you've got to balance those things out. You've got to accept the fact that as a minority, we're held to different standards. And this is not just a Muslim thing. This applies to everyone. Ask Black Americans about how they feel about being asked about crime and injustice and the special pressure that is put on Black Americans and about the assumptions that are made in relation to criminal justice. Unfortunately, such is the nature of racism, that in theory, yes, the burden is not on us in theory to comfort our oppressor, our accuser, the person discriminating against us. But the reality is, if we don't do it, what is the alternative? What is the vacuum that is left? What is the void that is left? And also, you've got to look at best practice. Where are those places where Muslims have made an impact, have managed to get things done? Where are those areas where minorities have managed to get ahead and change attitudes? I gave the example of gay rights. That wouldn't have happened unless cultural attitudes were changed, unless relationships were built. That is an important, relevant 21st century example for Muslims, which is, 10, 20 years ago, homophobia was rampant and common still in the past. It is much less so today, and legally the situation has changed. There is no reason, aside from all the geopolitics on a domestic level, there is no reason that can't happen for other minority communities. And yes, I agree with you. My short answer to your question is, we shouldn't have to, and I would never ever say to someone, you have to do this, and I would never accept a non-Muslim telling me, you must condemn terrorism. But on the other hand, is it a strategic, wise thing to do? Yes. After a terrorist attack, does it help if lots of Muslims condemn it? It does. I hate the fact that it does, but it does. And too many of us, and I know I'm sitting at university, so I shouldn't kill all your idealism, we're very idealistic. But in the real world, unfortunately, you have to make those moral compromises. You have to do things that we find unpleasant. I mean, I'll give you my example. For example, there's many a time where I've resented the fact that, I was a journalist in the UK, I wrote a biography of the Labour leader, I wrote a book about the economy and the financial crash, but I'm also a Muslim, so I get invited onto a lot of debates to talk about Muslim-y things. And many times I resent that. I think, why do I have to go do that? On the other hand, if I don't do that, I'm also the guy sitting at home going, they didn't get a Muslim on the panel, there's such a biased discussion. So, there is that, you walk that tightrope whereby you don't want to be defined by your faith. But on the other hand, your faith is up for public grab. Everyone's having a go at it, everyone's taking a piece of it, don't you want to be part of that conversation as well? It's a very weird tightrope to have to walk, but we are walking. That's my slightly inadequate answer to a very good question. Okay, any more questions? Yes?
I have two questions for you. Is this working or?
Hold it tight.
Is this close enough?
Very close.
All right. Not sure if you can hear me. Yes? Okay. I can't hear myself.
Very well.
All right. Sorry. I actually have two questions for you. Back in 2008, and I'm Cuban American. Most of my community is conservative, right? But back in 2008, I was working for the time period of the primaries on the Obama campaign, with the Obama campaign. And I was actually going around to mosques to get people to register to vote. So on one occasion, I go to one of these mosques, and of course I'm dealing with mostly the ladies, mostly the women. Many of the women were also from immigrant communities, so they were waiting basically to see what their husbands had selected in order for them to make the decision, the older ladies. But I came across two young women. One of them was actually a Muslim convert. She was from Brazil originally, and she was sitting next to another woman who was from sub-Saharan Africa, a Muslim from sub-Saharan Africa. And she basically, when I went to register them to vote, or asked them if they could register, the woman from sub-Saharan Africa basically said, no, we don't vote. And the Brazilian woman who was a citizen basically said, yeah, we don't vote. So I actually got her registered to vote because I told her that I was Cuban American, at which point she got very upset that Cubans supported Bush. It was 2008, so I said, okay, so how could you be upset at Cubans for voting, but you don't vote? So I got her to vote. But I'm wondering, to what extent is that still, something that certain communities of Muslims in the United States believe, that they shouldn't engage in the political process?
Yes, it's a good question. It's much more prevalent in Europe than it is here. And there is this view. In the UK, when I was growing up in the 1980s and 90s, there was a group you may have heard of called Hizb ut-Tahrir, which was very popular with a lot of Muslims on campus in universities, much less so today. But their whole thing was, it is shirk, it is an insult to God to vote, it is un-Islamic. They're much less influential today for two reasons. Number one, Islamic scholars, both Sunni and Shia, both conservative and liberal, have come out and said there's no bar to voting, in fact, nothing wrong with voting at all. In fact, you have Muslim democracies like Tunisia, where Muslim parties are running an election, so it's very hard to make that argument on a kind of theological or even politically Islamic basis. So one is, the theological argument, as weak as it was, is even weaker today, I would argue. And I would probably say, people like the woman you met are in a big minority, especially in the US. That's what the polling suggests. The second one is, forget the theology, just in practical terms. Muslim Americans have been burned. Just like Muslims across the the West. Are you telling me, next year in France, Marine Le Pen, leader of the National Front, which says that Muslims praying in public is the equivalent of Nazis occupying France. She's running, wants to ban halal meat. She's running for election. How many of even the most hardcore, anti-voting, conservative Salafists in France are not going to vote against Marine Le Pen? If only just to keep their halal meat halal. So, there's a certain interest-based argument, which is the more the stakes are ramped up for Muslims, and unfortunately over the years, they are ramped up in every election cycle, in pretty much every country in the West. Good old Canadians, look at that lucky. The exception to the rule. As they're ramped up everywhere, there's a practical point, which is Muslims are not stupid. They understand that if there is a certain way to stop this from happening, what's that line, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? I think the Bush example right in 2000, where a solid block of Muslim Americans voted for George Bush, thinking he's going to be great for us. And then saw the results of that, and you saw by 2004, it was a complete reversal. There was 70% voting for Kerry, and I think by the time Obama won in 2012, 90% of Muslims were voting Democrat. And this time, let's see what Mr. Trump does for the Muslim American vote. I think on practical terms, that is the simplest argument. I mean, theological arguments are neither here nor there. I think there's an argument about, and I think, looking at the stats, I mentioned them in the talk, there are now 300,000 extra Muslim voters registered, they're aiming for 1 million. That is, every cloud has a silver lining. The cloud of Islamophobia means that Muslim Americans are starting to get serious about politics. There are more Muslim Americans running for office at a state level and county level. In Washington State, I recently met Cyrus Habib, I think his name is, Iranian American, Muslim American, blind American, running for lieutenant governor, beat 10 other candidates. Is going to become lieutenant governor of Washington State, according to the polls. I mean, that is happening, slowly, but it's happening.
My other question was regarding American Muslims in comparison to European Muslims. How would you say the two communities are meeting similar or different challenges?
It's a good question, that's a whole other talk, but it's a common question that I get asked. I mean, look, in terms of profiles, Muslim Americans are way better off than European Muslims on many levels. On a socioeconomic level, Muslim Americans have a much higher socioeconomic bracket of the immigrants who came to the US. There's also a much stronger indigenous base. Muslim Americans have been in the United States since the very beginning. 1/4 to 1/3 of the slaves that were brought over from Africa were Muslim. So there have been Muslims from the very beginning of the United States, in the same way that there weren't Muslims from the very beginning of the French Republic or the United Kingdom. So in some senses, both socioeconomic and historical, Muslim Americans are clearly better off than their French or British or German counterparts. There's also a situation which is, the United States, for all its faults today and for all its anti-immigration rhetoric today, is fundamentally a nation of immigrants, in which immigrants have done very well, both in business, public life, etc., etc. In the same way, you couldn't say the same thing about Germany and its Turkish immigrant population. You couldn't say the same thing about France and its North African immigrant population. These are places that are still very hostile to foreigners, to people who look and sound different, in a way that the US traditionally, barring recent years, hasn't always been. So I would say that on one level. And the other way that you guys have it much better off, Muslim Americans have it much better off in the US is, and I was just saying is that the professor beforehand is, this is a much more godly country. In America, religion is still taken seriously. You still have a fundamentally very public Christian presence, very influential Christian presence. You can't be president of the United States if you don't believe in God. You will get run out of office if you're an atheist. I think according to the polling, the only group of people who are hated more than Muslims are atheists. We're not the worst. We're not the most hated. So it just speaks volumes for how religious a country this still is. And therefore, in that context, Muslims in public life are not as alien. In Britain and France and such places, these are very secular countries. France has a very aggressively secular model. British religion's on the decline, the churches are empty, most people are atheists or agnostics. If they're Christian, they're just culturally Christian. So when a Muslim comes along and says, I want to pray in public, I want to eat halal meat, I want to talk about my faith in Parliament, that's very odd. And practicing a religion in public in the UK and Europe is much harder than it is in the United States. So those are the areas where Muslim Americans have it much better off. Where the Muslim Americans are much worse off, of course, is your politics. I mean, the politics here is crazy. There's no other word for it. It's a crazy election cycle. There is no equivalent, mainstream equivalent of Donald Trump in Western Europe. There are far-right equivalents, Marine Le Pen, Geert Wilders, but the German Chancellor, the centre-right politician in power in Germany, Angela Merkel, who just allowed 1 million Syrians into the country. The leader in Britain until very recently was David Cameron, who had appointed 2 Muslims to his cabinet. So, centre-right leader, for all his faults, did that. So, there's no equivalent of this kind of demonizing rhetoric of people coming up with almost Nazi-like plans for databases and badges and registrations, monitoring and surveillance. And it's the politics here that's become very ugly in a mainstream way. Because you don't have a parliamentary system, because you have this weird winner-takes-all presidential system, the far right has been channeled into the Republican Party and basically taken over the Republican Party in a way that European countries still have a mainstream, non-crazy, non-racist right-wing party. And therefore you can have Muslims in public office at the top of government, not being questioned always. So I think, there's pros and cons to both places. If I had to pick, I would say the American Muslims have a much better future ahead of them than European Muslims. Simply because Europe's history is much darker, and I think the European far right is much stronger. And I think the worry again is the religious angle. I think Europe is a place that has become very hostile towards faith and religion in a way that the US hasn't yet. That's just my opinion.
Thanks for the discussion, and I really enjoy your Oxford Union Hall talks. I was watching those. I was just curious of your opinion on Hillary Clinton's proposed no-fly zone. I mean, she mentions it as a humanitarian incentive, but I think anyone who knows the history of the Soviet-American relations in connection to Syria and the residuals since then, you probably see it's all about resistance towards Russia. But is there a chance that it could have a humanitarian benefit by taking Assad's, I mean, I know it could also risk war with Russia, but is there a chance that there could be a humanitarian benefit for Assad's planes not being allowed to fly?
Well, Syria is a nightmare in which there's no good options. I mean, I've been following Syria for the last 5 years, and it's bad, it's poisoned a lot of discourse in the Middle East, it's poisoned discourse in the West. Hillary Clinton, you mentioned, is interesting. A lot of Muslim Americans, she's clearly the lesser of 2 evils for a lot of Muslim Americans who don't like Hillary at all. Many voted for Bernie Sanders in places like Michigan. I know many young Muslim Americans who want to vote for Jill Stein. There is a great foreign policy angle to when Muslim Americans come to vote. Muslim Americans, like Muslims across the West, feel very strongly about what's happening either in their parent country of origin or in places like the Middle East. Syria obviously has become a dominant issue in a way that Palestine once was, if not more so. And Hillary is seen as very hawkish traditionally. She's the woman who voted for Iraq, she's the woman who did Libya. I often meet a lot of Muslim Americans like, Donald Trump's not that bad. He's just mean to Muslims. Hillary's killed Muslims. I find this an odd argument. Donald Trump had a chance to kill any Muslims here. He was doing The Apprentice. There was very no opportunity to kill Muslims in The Apprentice. Give him the Navy SEALs and the NSA and he'll have a go and some drones. But on the specific issue of Hillary, she clearly is a whore. I don't think she hides that fact. And she clearly wants to do something about Syria and escalate in a way that Barack's secret Muslim Obama hasn't. And whether she does or not will remain to be seen because, as a great Mike Tyson once said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And it's all very well saying, lots of presidents come to office with all sorts of grand plans for geopolitics and foreign intervention, which collide with reality. You mentioned the Russian reality. Look, I'm speaking only privately, personally, I'm on record, I'm against a no-fly zone, not because I like Assad or support that position or think there is a huge suffering in East Aleppo. There is. It's just, I don't think that is the solution. And I think, as you mentioned, there's a whole history there. A lot of people have written about this extensively. People like Mika Zenko at the Council on Foreign Relations have written very lucidly on no-fly zones and why the history of no-fly zones are not relevant to this argument, because in every other no-fly zone, there was no interference. If you look at the no-fly zone in northern Iraq, it was maintained by the US and the UK for a decade, more than a decade. There was no resistance, and Saddam never challenged that northern fly zone. Similarly, in places like the Balkans, once it was established, there was not actually any resistance. There weren't Bosnian. It wasn't really an effective Serbian response. So the history of no-fly zones isn't great. There's no real relevance here where you're actually going up against the Russian Air Force. General James Clapper, the head of intelligence, said on Thursday, we could have American planes shot down. The only solution in Syria, it's such a cliche, but it's true, is the only solution in Syria is a negotiated solution in which everyone tries to get as much as they can from the negotiation. There is no military solution in Syria. Hillary Clinton said in a speech to one of the many banks she spoke at, which was leaked by WikiLeaks last week, that if we set up a no-fly zone, we will end up killing civilians. She said that herself in private. Of course, she's a politician. What she says in private doesn't always match what she does in public. I think we will see generally a much more hawkish foreign policy under President Clinton, and a lot of the Muslim Americans who held their noses and voted for Hillary to stop Trump the day after she becomes president will immediately go back to being anti-Hillary and say, this is outrageous, stop bombing stuff. And not just Syria. I mean, Israel is a big issue for a lot of Muslim Americans. She's very close to Benjamin Netanyahu. She said he's going to be the first leader to visit the Oval Office within her first month in office. So she's going to do a lot of things to upset all of these Muslim Americans who are going to reluctantly trudge to the polls next Tuesday after next to vote for her.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and giving us the opportunity to talk to you live. Slavoj Žižek was commenting about Snowden, and he says, we all know that the government is spying on us, and his main fault is that he told us so. Right? He told us, yes, they are spying on you. So now you're bringing up the rhetoric of Donald Trump as if the government is not doing that, as if his database doesn't exist, all that stuff. Extreme wedding is not happening, Muslims are just freely traveling, and now with Donald Trump things will change. The reason I'm bringing this up, because to a large extent you said it yourself, when majority of Muslims voted for Bush, for the Republican, I was here, and I remember the whole campaign, there were many Muslim groups, such as Bosnians, a number of them, right, who were very much democratic because whatever they perceived that Democrats would help the Bosnians. So, you were talking of Muslims as if this is a one monolith group, like 3 million Muslims.
Yeah.
But there are lots of different groups within Muslims, and who talks on their behalf? You becoming a speaker of Muslims, you're aware of that, right?
It's a very good question. So let me break it into two parts. Let me deal with the first point, first part, monolithic. Monolithic is a very good point. I spent many years trying to point out to non-Muslim colleagues of mine in the media that Muslims aren't monolithic. Stop speaking about Muslim this, Muslim that, when there are different views on different subjects. Theologically, there are different views. Legally, jurisprudentially, there are different views. Politically, there are different views. Nationally, there are different views. Culturally, there are different views. So, and only now has the West woken up to, oh, there's Shias and Sunnis, and they got that completely wrong as well, about the origins of that ancient hatred, apparently. So, I agree with you 100%. Monolithically, we shouldn't treat any monolithic, but on the specific issue of elections, what's interesting is the last 20 years, or the last 20 years, 16 years of American politics has actually made US Muslims monolithic. It is a fact that Muslim Americans are going to vote in droves for one candidate. It's not a 50-50 split. In fact, what was remarkable is what happened between 2000 and 2004 is that in 2000, you had 60% of Muslim Americans voting for Bush, 40% for Gore. A huge win for Bush. And yet within 4 years, it was 70% reversed. Astonishing for any community, for any group to switch in that way. In 1 4-year period, they went from 60% Republican to 70% Democrat. And by 2012, they went 90% Democrat. So when you say they're not monopolitically, unfortunately, such is the state of Republican Islamophobia, that they have forced to become monolithic. As much as they hate Hillary Clinton's foreign policy, as much as they may disagree with Democratic positions on gay marriage or abortion, on social issues, as I said earlier to the question earlier, just on a sheer survival instinct and on a sheer stop being bigoted towards me instinct, the vast majority of Muslims have gone into the Democratic. There's no reason they should have to. As I say, there's many Republican policies. I'm sure there are many Muslims who support low taxes. There's many Muslims who don't like abortion. There's many Muslims who support the Republican position and maybe on a variety of things. The point is, as long as the Republican Party is basically an openly, brazenly anti-Muslim party, and you say, yes, the Democrats are doing things, but there's a big difference between doing horrible things, which no one's doubting Obama has done, from drone strikes to spying on mosques, etc. But there's a very big difference between that and openly inciting and fomenting violence on the streets. I mean, it's not a coincidence that there's been a record number of attacks on Muslims in the street and mosque over the last 18 months. That's not a coincidence. That is a direct result of a Republican presidential campaign. In fact, Dalia Mugahed of the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, former Gallup pollster, former Obama advisor, she did a very interesting study, and she looked at spikes in Islamophobia. And do you know when there are spikes in Islamophobic attacks in the United States? You would think after terrorist attacks, after 9/11, after San Bernardino, after Major Mehdi Hasan. Not true. In fact, Islamophobia went down, not up, after San Bernardino last year. The spikes in Islamophobic attacks is in every election cycle. You can trace it. It is manufactured. This is not, Muslims stop complaining about Islamophobia. It's a spontaneous backlash from non-Muslims because they're scared of terrorist attacks. Not true. The data doesn't fit that. The data shows that these are artificially manufactured instances of bigotry. And so, because there's a particular group of people in this country who see attacking Muslims as politically beneficial. And this guy, the current candidate, has taken it to its logical extreme, where he says ban all of them from entering the country, which forces even people like Paul Ryan, who's not exactly a fan of Muslims, come out and say, actually, you can't do that. Even that's too far for me. I mean, one of the things about Donald Trump, you know, say every cloud has a silver lining. As awful as his rhetoric has been, what's been interesting is he's forced even certain members of his own party, who are not pro-Muslim in any way. Marco Rubio is awful on Muslim matters, but he's forced them to come out and defend Muslim Americans simply because they can't be seen to be as extreme as him. It's almost like he's moved the bar so far that even the kind of, you know, part-time Islamophobes have said, come on, we can't go this far. So on the monolithic point, that's one thing. Just very quickly on who speaks for Muslims. It's a great question. And again, I come back to the first question we had. In a theoretical world, nobody speaks for Muslims. Each Muslim speaks for themselves. We're not a monolith. We're not a, you know, we didn't sign up to some membership society where we get membership cards and we vote for this person speaks for us. Each person speaks for themselves. That's how it should be, especially in a democracy. But again, we're not in a perfect world. We're in a very imperfect world where Muslims are collectivized, are securitized, are seen through a prism of security, threat, suspicion. And therefore you do have Muslim groups who are trying to speak, quote unquote, on behalf of Muslims and get the voice across. And in the media, sadly, there are no voices from Muslims. I mean, in recent years, you have more Muslim Americans now doing things on TV, you know, the likes of Reza Aslan, the likes of Dalia Mugahed, Hassan Minhaj at The Daily Show. You have a few Muslim Americans now going on CNN, doing interesting things, doing cultural things. But, you know, they're few and far between. And I think most people say to me, oh, do you speak for Muslims? Of course I don't. But am I seen as a quote-unquote representative of Muslims by non-Muslims? Unfortunately, yes. Because I don't know many other people. I gave a speech in Houston to a room full of 250 elderly white Republicans. And they said, why aren't there more people like you, more moderate Muslims? I said, there are, you just don't know any. You don't see any, because they're not allowed on your TV screens. So that is the problem. And my answer to the question of who speaks for Muslims, unfortunately the media speaks for Muslims. They decide who gets to go on TV, who gets to be seen, who gets to be heard, how the debates are framed, who the participants are. And that's something we should be pushing back against.
I meant, you know, to connect those two. When there is so many different Muslims, there should be some directions of, okay, we don't vote one cycle for Republican, next cycle for Democrat, third cycle, but there should be some thought behind it. So, yeah.
I think there is a lot of thought now. A lot of it is issues-based. I think most people don't want to be party political. It's not about vote Democrat, vote Republican, and I would never say that either. I think there's a lot of. I'm going to an event this evening where I'm giving a similar talk at the Emerge banquet. Emerge is a new Muslim lobbying group, which is trying to kind of get Muslims involved in politics and trying to get politicians to understand the strategic benefit of engaging with Muslim voters. And Emerge, you know, groups like Emerge and other groups, they're saying, look, here are issues we care about. Here are issues which uncontroversial issues. You know, most Muslims don't want to be spied on in a mosque. Most Muslims want to be able to go and come from places as they please. Fairly uncontroversial civilities issues. And I think you can say to political parties, these are the issues we care about as a community, as a community of communities. It's nothing to do with theology, with being Sunni or Shia or Arab or Indo-Pak. These are things that affect us, that we care about, the polling shows we care about. And what are you going to do about it? I think it's fairly uncontroversial. I don't think it's a controversial position to say a lot of Muslims care about Palestine. I don't think that's controversial. I think that's fairly uncontroversial. Therefore, I think it's fair enough for Muslim groups to say to party politicians, what's your stance on the Israel-Palestine conflict? I think think that's a legitimate thing to do, something that's useful to be done. But I take your wider point. Nope.
Do you think that northern Iraqi Kurdistan has a decent chance to thrive?
Well, that's a very specific question. Lucky I just did a program on Northern Iraqi Kurdistan just 2 weeks ago, that's useful. Does it have a chance to thrive? Look, at the moment, Iraq is in chaos. You all know what's happening on the ground there. Literally, as we speak, there are Iraqi soldiers, militiamen, Peshmerga, literally giving their lives to try and take it back from one of the world's worst groups, take back places like Mosul. My worry is that thanks to ISIL, ISIS, Daesh, whatever you want to call them, thanks to their physical presence on the ground, countries like Iraq and Syria, will they ever recover in terms of borders, in terms of national unity, in terms of sovereignty, in terms of community relations? I mean, the Kurds are heavily romanticized in the West. They're seen as like the goodies, everyone else is the baddies, and there are many good things about the Kurds, but no one's perfect. Peshmerga have also carried out all sorts of human rights abuses in towns that they've been taken from Iraqi Sunni Arabs. So there's all sorts of debates to be had about how they carve up the pie. There's going to be a drive for Kurdish independence very, very soon, there's no doubt about that. And the question will be, what happens to Iraq, what happens to the region? We saw what happened with the Arab Spring. You know, what happens in certain Arab countries, such as the interconnectedness of that region, that has immediately knock-on effects. So, you know, if the Kurds in Iraq were to go independent, you're going to have knock-on effects in Turkey, you're going to have knock-on effects in Syria, you're going to have knock-on effects in Iran. I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. What I'm saying is it will be a very, very big move. What the Kurds have done very well, and this is interesting for Muslims living in the West, and Professor and I were discussing this beforehand about Muslim minorities and reconciling Islam with liberalism, with secularism, with democracy. Can it be done? Should it be done? The Kurdish experiment, in many ways, is that experiment, even under Saddam and now under a quote-unquote, Muslim majority government in Baghdad, under the constitution that calls it Islamic. You have Kurds basically governing themselves in a relatively secular, democratic basis compared to the rest of the Middle East. And how long can that survive? Who knows? There's a lot of authoritarianism in that place too. It's far from perfect. The president Barzani of Northern Kurdistan, his term ran out several years ago. He's still president, like Mahmoud Abbas in the Palestinian authorities. Even secular Arab rulers still have serious issues with basic democratic principles.
Thank you for your feedback.
Actually, I have another question. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. So, forgot my question. No, actually, I remember now. My question was regarding, there's several books that have been written regarding the Islamophobia industry. So is there such an industry?
I think there is. I think it's a good question. So Nathan Lee, a good friend of mine, wrote one of those books called The Islamophobia Industry. And another good friend of mine, Wajat Ali, wrote a report for CAP, which is worth a read if you're interested in the subject, called Fear Inc., which came out in 2011, which actually documents the ties between the various think tanks and pseudo-think tanks and institutes who funnel money into these projects. As I said earlier, Islamophobia, unfortunately, there's two big myths about Islamophobia very quickly. Number one is, it's not racism. So Richard Dawkins, the scientist, New Atheist, he always says this line, Sam Harris as well, the New Atheists have this line that we're not racists, because Islam's an ideology. So being Islamophobic is not bad, we're just anti a set of ideas. We're not racists, which is a problem, because of course, when you look at how Muslims are attacked, it's in a very racial way. It's in every, we talk about, there's a reason why Sikhs in turbans get attacked on the street. And it's not because it's a bunch of ideas being attacked. It's because they're brown, they have beards, they have turbans, they must be ergo a Muslim. So there's a huge racial component to Islamophobia, which is completely overlooked. There's a reason why every time I tweeted the other day about, Islamophobia and how there was a media headline in Britain which was really anti-Muslim, and I tweeted about, it's so depressing for British Muslims to wake up every day to an Islamophobia headline. And I got a torrent of Islamophobic abuse. People saying, well, get out of the West End, go. And it was classic was, go live in Arabia. First of all, there's no place in Arabia. Number two, I'm not from Arabia, I'm not Arab. I'm British from India. At least get it right. At least get your racist abuse accurate. Go live in India. It would make some sense. But that's the whole point. There is a huge, Islam is an Arab religion. These people are foreign invaders, etc., etc., etc. So First point when dealing with Islamophobia and the people who push Islamophobia is pushing back at this idea that it's not a form of racism. It clearly is a form of cultural racism. And then the second one is the point I made earlier, is it's a spontaneous response to Muslim terrorists. If you Muslims are worried about bigotry, stop blowing stuff up. The number of times I've heard that. Which, as I said earlier, number one, there's no correlation between attacks and Islamophobic abuse and Islamophobic rhetoric. And number two, it's not spontaneous because we know the studies have been done, the money chains have been seen, you know the old phrase, follow the money. These people don't come from nowhere, the Robert Spencers, the Pamela Gellers at the extreme end, and even the more moderate versions of the Islamophobes, they don't come from nowhere, they get funded, they get, you look at some of the institutions like Frank Gaffney. You look at Gaffney, some of you know Frank Gaffney, a former Reagan official who produces dubious polls about Muslim American, who's now advising Trump, was advising Ted Cruz. These people are so well funded, and I always say to Muslim Americans, if you're going to push back against Islamophobia, you have to really do it in the dots and first of all see where is it coming from. It's not spontaneous. It is manufactured, just as all forms of racism and bigotry are manufactured in some shape or form. This is too, and we're a useful bogeyman. After, it's been well documented. You guys, university students, how much literature is there on the end of the Cold War and the need for an external enemy? I mean, this is not people are 9/11, 9/11. No, 1995, I think it was. Willy Kleiss, the former head of NATO, said the red threat of the communism has been replaced with the green threat of Islam. I mean, this has been around for a long time, whereby Muslims are useful bogeymen, and therefore you need to justify. You need an intellectual apparatus. You now have all these experts. My favorite people are these people who turn up on TV. They're experts on Islam. They can speak no Arabic. They have no formal qualifications. They've never studied the Middle East. They've never traveled in the Middle East. You can tell Rami Khouri, a great piece saying, every time you see an expert on Islamic terrorism or Islamic radicalism, check his pronunciations. They can't even say the names of anything correctly. Robert Spencer, probably America's most famous Islamophobe, uses Google Translate to read the Quran. So this is the level of people who are out there, and you have to ask, how do they get ahead? Because it's not spontaneous, it comes from somewhere. Yes, it's definitely worth digging more into. And you look at the people around Trump, you look at people like I was mentioning earlier, Walid Farez, who's advising Trump. These people, they're on the circuit and they do the rounds.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.